Hi, thank you for choosing to listen to my podcast. Today I will be talking with a high school teacher from my school about how change impacts life. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm here with Mr. Sarvis, a tech and business teacher here at Perry High School, and I just kind of wanted to talk to you. This is your final year here at the high school, and you've mentioned to me before you never planned on being a teacher in the first place. So how did that change the course of your life?
Well, you're right, Jeffrey. If you would have asked me coming out of high school, are you going to go into education? You're going to become a teacher? I said, why would I want to do that? No offense to everybody I've worked with over the years. But you just don't know what's around the next corner in your life. I was happy with what I was doing, and I received a phone call on a Friday afternoon from the principal at Riverside High School asking me if I was interested in coaching their cross-country team. And, honestly, I remember saying to him, I don't know, I've never really thought about that. He said, well, we need a coach, and it begins on Monday, and could you at least reflect on this? And I said, certainly, and so I had the weekend to think about it, and timing was perfect. I was just about to change jobs at the time. I was in the private sector then, and so I called my to-be boss and said, hey, I just was handed this opportunity, and I think I might want to try it. And I was wondering, could we make this work with my job? And she said, yeah, so long as you're doing what we need to have done for our clients, I have no problem when you work, And I knew it was just during the fall. And so I called the principal back on Monday and said, I accept the offer. I'd love to try this. And it was that event that precipitated me a couple years later deciding to go back to college and get my teaching license, because I had to resign the position after 2 seasons due to a change in my workload, and it just wasn't allowing me the free time to be able to coach, and I missed it. I'm like, gosh, I absolutely loved working with those students and helping them to set goals and accomplish those goals, and watching the joy in them, accomplishing things that they didn't think maybe was possible at one point in their lives. And so again, that prompted me to go back and get my teaching license, and well, here we are 31 years later.
Yeah, 31 years later, and you're planning on going where with your life?
Well, at the end of this year, as you had mentioned earlier, this will be it for me for this part of the journey in my life. And I decided last summer that I think I'd love to go and sell cars. I've always loved cars. I've always had a fascination with cars. And so I went and spoke to a local dealership and told them that, here's what I'm currently doing, and here's my plan for the future. And I'd love to become a part of your corporation, your organization. And it looks like that's, God willing, going to happen here come the summer.
Nice. Yeah. So your life has changed completely different paths, not once but twice. You first started off in an office setting, sort of, and then you went to education, and now you're going to sales. What was your plan out of high school? Did you know what you were going to do?
No, I did not. Excuse me. I'd never had anyone in my family go to college. And so I thought, boy, do I want 4 more years of high school? And the answer to that, was no. And so I went to work for one of the guys that a friend of mine that I ran with in high school. His dad had a company. I went to work for him, but at the same time was taking courses over at Lakeland. And I just remember one evening I was working night shifts, and I just had this epiphany. I don't know, this vision. I don't know what it was, but it just said, is this really what you see yourself doing for the rest of your life? And thankfully, the answer, and I enjoyed it, but it's like I didn't see this as a career. Mm-hmm. And so I spoke to a friend who was down at Ohio State and told her that I think I'm going to change direction here. I'm going to do a little shift, and I think I want to go to school and get a degree and maybe run. So spoke to their coach, got on their program. So grateful that I went there. There's so many opportunities there. And even still, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to do something that was probably going to require a degree. Okay. And so long story short, I got a business degree partially due to the fact that my family had 2 businesses when I grew up. So I enjoyed that experience, and I thought, well, maybe that's a direction I should consider.
So back talking about change. Recently, there was an event I'm sure many of you were familiar with, COVID, that happened in 2020, absolutely changed everything. How did that really change your life as an educator? Because as a student, I've never done an online class. I've never done a Zoom class. So I really needed to adapt and learn how all of that works. Did you have a similar experience with, like, education?
From the pandemic, as a result of the pandemic? Oh, absolutely. A couple things came out of it for me, from my perspective. One was, thank God for technology, and it gave us the ability to continue moving forward with, our lives as a whole, but finitely speaking about through my career and what you're here for, our educations. Imagine if we didn't have the capability to continue to go to Zoom, utilize Zoom, that app, and online learning. If we didn't have that ability, everybody's education would have been delayed. And suddenly you're going to be 19, possibly 20 when you graduate. Oh, that would have been awful. I think that would have been a terrible experience, especially for those that were like juniors and seniors. They have it interrupted like that with no fallback. But thank God that our district and most districts had the ability to continue to provide you guys the opportunities. The second thing, the takeaway, so I was really grateful for that. The second thing for me, from my perspective, was it showed me how much I valued being in person with you guys, the students, and my colleagues, and how much I didn't enjoy the online. Again, I'm grateful that we had the technology that gave us that opportunity, but it just made me appreciate even more the power of being there, the human experience, being with the people in person, face to face, and learning and laughing and growing together that way. So I'm so grateful that we still have these brick and mortar buildings and we're able to be here together, and I think it shows you how important people are.
Yeah, and in the future, do you think that it's going to change into possibly there's not going to be physical school buildings and everything's just going to be remote?
Jeffrey, that's a great question, and that's something that we've discussed as a topic for a couple of decades now that I can recall. And I remember there was a point, and I remember reading some of the educational publications, how it's kind of trending towards these school buildings as we know them. The brick and mortar buildings are going to kind of become like antiquated and just maybe museums. And because technology, we won't need people. I'm sorry, I think at the end of the day, people are the most powerful thing. There's AI now and all of these things. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. Maybe I'm old school in my thinking here, but I think there's so much more to it when you factor in that human element. I don't know how AI can motivate like a teacher/coach can, has that ability to do. I think that's super important. I see myself as a moderator, as a motivator, and maybe a sprinkle in a little bit of information. But, my hope is, and I think most of my colleagues, our hope is that at the end of the day, you will walk out of here as part of our school's mission statement as lifelong learners that are taught, and maybe not to the nth degree, but, self-motivated, and how to find the information. Granted, we're in a day where we get notifications, everything's pushed to us. And I remember having a prof that told me this. He said, it's about finding the information. If you can find the information, you can literally learn anything that you want to learn. And I believe he was absolutely right with that. So I think it's important that we still have these brick and mortar buildings, that we still have the ability to be together And people, I think, really appreciate, at the end of the day, I hope, the power of motivation, the power of having that person there that could be your mentor. You know, I'm sorry, I don't know if technology can replace that. I pray it doesn't. I pray it doesn't.
Yeah.
I can't think of an AI that's going to tell me you gotta want it, and I'm gonna be ooh, and feel those tingles, that emotion. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's only something that
It's not out there yet.
Yeah, that's for now. That's only a human can do. But I mean, with the direction that like AI chatbots are going in, it could be in the very near future that at least some education aspects will be replaced by artificial intelligence and technology.
Sure. I mean, we've seen that over the years, over the decades, and without question, you know, it does add it has a lot of value. There's a lot of value in it, okay? But again, I think at the end of the day, I would be sad if suddenly the human condition is removed from that equation, you know, of learning, of educating, of inspiring. It would be sad, because I think that's kind of what life's all about, those relationships that you create. You know, I've told athletes over the years that, you know, you're going to remember those successes that you've had, you know, the accolades that maybe you've achieved, you've earned, and you should remember those, because that's, you know, that means you were willing to stretch and change and challenge yourself. But I said, I think even more importantly, what I hope you take away is years later, when you reflect back on our time together, the relationships that you created, you know, with yourself and your peers, and hopefully with, you know, me or whoever your coaches have been, those relationships that you foster. I think that's the thing that you remember the most. You know, that you could share those experiences, both the highs and the lows, with others.
Yeah, and I had a great time talking with you today. I mean,
thanks.
I think you're very wise, and you're able to kind of put stuff into words very well. So I thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I would like to thank Mr. Sarvis for taking the time out of his day to do this podcast with me. I think he gave some very good insights into what I was trying to talk about. But I would also like to thank you. This podcast has been so fun to make, and I'm debating whether I want to do some more, which I think I will. So thank you for listening.